All right, welcome everybody to this session on course in disruptive times. And this session is about resilience for future leaders and entrepreneurs. So I would like to reach a couple of things today. One is to give you an overview what resilience is and how it actually works. And I just realized that my visual is frozen. I need to restart. Okay, so what is resilience? How does it work? What's the connection to leadership? And we'll talk about um, how do we actually cope with crisis and how do we cope with tough times? What are the mechanics? What is research that we can actually apply to ourselves? And we will also have a section of the session tonight where we talk about what happens when the level of resilience is not enough anymore, and what are kind of symptoms. And but we will, I promise we will end on a high note, and I would like to give you a scientifically proven tool to your hands that you can actually take away and start using tonight, to actually help you in order to, stay on course when the going gets tough, and when you feel, it's a lot, it's a lot to cope with, it's a lot to go through, right? So that's the plan for today, and all of that in the given time. And we will have, I'll pause for questions on the way, and there will also be some interactive polls just to see how you kind of reflect something for yourself so that it gets a bit more tangible, and we go also a little bit into the application. So um, what struck me pretty early on in my career is, why is it that you meet some people who are going through tough times and they look at you with a silent smile, and they, carry their situation with a certain degree of dignity, and then there are others who go through a similar situation and obviously suffer a lot, and are unhappy with the situation and have more difficulties to cope. And I was I was wondering about that. Why, why the difference? Is that something that you're born with? Is that something that you can actually learn? And I had no real term for this. And then one day I came across an HBR, a Harvard Business Review article written by Danielle Coutu about how resilience works. And I was electrified. Like, this is it. This is the missing piece. This is what I was actually looking for. And then I started kind of grinding my teeth into the subject. And this is now about 11 years ago. And I would like to give you a little bit of an overview of the kind of learnings that we had since then, and how to kind of apply that. I'm a pretty curious person. I like to learn. I've been a cabinet maker. I've been an engineer. I had my first startup during the studies, worked for banks in Luxembourg, then moved on into consulting, worked with Accenture, and then, did an MBA, executive MBA with WHU, and then kind of moved on, and eventually was at my first leadership position in Bombardier, being in charge of a global rollout of SAP. Surprise, surprise, no connection here. But, when you do such things, you learn a lot about leadership and what works and what doesn't work. You learn a lot about stress. And at that point, I got to know coaching from being coached myself. So I was a client at that point in time, which was very helpful. And then a couple of steps later, I became managing director of Dell for the consulting business in EMEA, which sounds great on paper, but as you know, Dell is not a consulting company, never was. So I decided that's not for me. I really want to work with people. What I really want is to help people grow and to develop them. And this is why I kind of quit this executive role. And not only I became a coach, but even worse, I became a shrink. So I'm a certified psychotherapist, and that was, went back to school, worked in a clinic, worked with patients that were there, and I could look them up on LinkedIn, and I saw their patient file, and I was like, wow, that could be me. That's not much different. I like to work hard. I'm passionate in what I do, and they were the same. So I was, starting to wonder, what is the difference? Why are they patients and I happen to be co-therapist? And since I had gray hair already then, so people thought I was competent, so they would kind of, I had a lot of access to the people, and there were a couple of conversations that I had with patients that kind of made me think a lot. And over this, I came into writing. I, started developing own models around resilience and that kind of thing, and have published multiple books, around 10 since that time. And from there on, went into speaking and also giving lectures at different business schools, WHU and European Business School being one of them. And then, what Michael mentioned. So this is my engagement for the CIS Foundation, and it has to do with resilience. No big surprise. So these scholarships obviously help people to grow. They travel alone without own money into a foreign country, have to study something, write a thesis about it. And that was when I was very young. I had one of those scholarships, and now, as I'm obviously not more so young, I am trying to raise money by cycling around the world. This year, Corona permitting, it will be through Canada, and so far I could raise around 80,000 euro with this. So keep fingers crossed that this will go on. Okay, but enough about me. Let's talk about resilience. So maybe some of you had Latin in school, and now it would be the good time to show off with your Latin. So what's the word mean? And the word root is resiliere. So if anybody wants to kind of show their Latin skills, now would be a great time. So if there's anybody volunteering, please write in the chat. And if not, no, never mind. I had to look it up myself in the beginning. So resiliere, the root actually says to bounce back. So the idea of the term is that if something happens, you can kind of bounce back, and you can think as a visual, you can think of that sponge, right? So the idea really is that this sponge is a physical object, and this physical object can react to an impact from the outside in an elastic way. And this elasticity, this is what resilience actually means. And it comes from physical science, from physics, from material science. And over the years, it made its way into psychology. And if you listen to a CEO giving a speech today, you may well hear the term resilience in their talk. So it has arrived in everyday business language, which is also quite remarkable. And I would like to talk a little bit about, what's the background about it, some basic research that has to do with that, so that we all get an understanding. But before we go there, I would actually like to hear from you, or read from you actually. And I would like to know, we are now around a year in this pandemic, and I guess that you have learned something about yourself in this past month. And I would like to invite you into a reflection to write down one word or one sentence. What have you learned about yourself, about your own level of resilience, about how you cope with the situation? What is easy for you? What is difficult for you? To please write that in the chat so that we can have a little bit of engagement amongst us. So I give you a couple of minutes to come up with your thoughts, please. Meditation is key. Thank you. Self-organization makes you more happy. Being part of a community is crucial. I need silence and sleep. And monks are only so resilient because they don't have kids and thus got enough sleep and silence and sleep. Okay, good one. Taking the first week in the new year off to really calm down. Yeah, thank you. Sharing thoughts, so opening up, talking to others. Very good. Anything else? Anything else that you learned about yourself? Working on a project I'm passionate about keeps me motivated and driven. Well said. Yes, absolutely. So something that we deeply can relate to, that is really crucial, important to us. Daily routines are important. Structures, how do you structure your day, that you don't need to ponder every time, but next step, next step, next step. Physical exercise, absolutely. So there's a ton of coping mechanisms you actually bring up already very well. Anything else? I need to feel like I can achieve small, concrete things every day. Very good. Yeah. So what do I want to do for today? What is doable? Can I achieve it? And then write it down and tick it off and have this good feeling of being able to tick it off. Yes, absolutely. Listening to my needs, even when I have to do different things. So to my needs means I'm listening inside, right? This is called self-awareness. I'm aware of what I need. Great. I like this interactivity in this group. Very good. Focus on what I can control. Very good. So this sense of control or sense of coherence, and as some in psychology research kind of call it, being thankful for little things. Great tools, great insights that you have. Thank you so much for sharing them. And we will kind of integrate that. All of what you said is absolutely relevant. And we will kind of integrate that into an overall model around resilience. And what you will see is that resilience is not so much about being resilient, but resilience is much more about doing things that make you resilient. So there's a very strong active component to it. And the good thing about resilience is, yes, partially it is actually innate, meaning it is part of our DNA, but partially, and that is the greater part, it can also be learned, and it has to be learned, and it has to be practiced on a regular basis. This is why these routines, rituals, small steps, all these make a hell of a lot of sense, because this is exactly those resilience habits that you can actually train for yourself. What else came in? Getting creative. And yeah, good. So let's continue with that. Thank you for that. And we will check in at a later point in time again, and we will also open a dialogue around that. The next part is around, so where does resilience research come from? And especially in the terms of psychology. And here there's one particular person to quote, Emmy Werner, born in Germany, moved in the US, and she was a developmental psychologist. So those that are studying the development of men into adulthood and how this actually happens. And she emigrated during World War II with her parents into the US, and then later she studied. And then when it came to the 1950s, there was this paradigm around, if you struggle with life, if you have a problem to cope with a crisis in life, it is because your youth, it is because of your childhood. And she said, well, that might be true, but actually we have no proof or evidence that this is actually really true, because what we do is we see a person that struggles in life, and then we check back, how was the childhood? But that is a systemic error, as I'm sure you can see, because you're never looking at the totality of a cohort. You're only looking at those that develop problems later in life. So she said, well, if we want to research this in a really scientific way, what we need is, we need a cohort of people, and we need to follow them over a longer period of time in order to really be able to see who of them develop challenges in life and who not. And in order to achieve that, it was really important that this was a community where she could actually follow the people around. We are in the 1950s, long before internet was discovered, long before modern communication technology was discovered. So she said, well, maybe an island makes sense. And so she took the island Kauai. Kauai belongs to Hawaii. And she identified the birth year of 1956, 698 kids born during that day. And this was her study cohort. And her team and herself, they kind of accompanied those youngsters through their life for an astounding period of 40 years, 40 years. It wasn't planned in the beginning like that long, but it kind of unfolded. And now there were problems in this society because the US Navy fleet was stationed at Kauai. You had a poor population, there was no tourism, And it created a lot of frictions and also some challenges for the communities. There was unemployment, there was criminalism, there was drug abuse, alcoholism, some parents not even being present because they were in jail. And as such, she kind of looked at the population and found that 1/3 of them, or one particular group, they came from so-called challenged households, meaning, parents not being there, parents being drug addicts, alcoholics, or something like that. And the surprising fact was 2/3 actually developed problems later in life, but 1/3 kind of refused to develop problems. And this is when the entire resilience research started. So what she and her team did is they tried to get in as many factors as possible. So why is it that what do they have in common? Why do they go through life seemingly unaffected of the difficulties that they were facing early on in their youth, where people are most vulnerable, as we know, right? And this is what they came up with. I would love to chat with you now to pick your thoughts, but I think with 57 people, that's a bit difficult to kind of realize. So actually, you know what? Let's try this. You have been so active in the chat. So what, if you think about your own life experience, what do you think they had in common? Those people, challenged households, but they went through life seemingly unaffected. Maybe we try this. Let's write in the chat. What do you think? What is the magic ingredient, the secret ingredient that they had in common? A positive attitude, good point. A different frame, story of how they viewed things. They didn't let the past determine who they are, absolutely. A life goal, dream goals, a belief that they were in control of their own lives. Very good, very good. Maybe they were thankful for little things in their life. Maybe they were. Yes, absolutely. Good point. Yeah, let's see. Do we get some more points? All right, great points. So, and actually, very accurate. So this is what they came up with. So one was they were actually able to entertain positive relationships. So you are certainly familiar with the terms introversion versus extroversion. So there was a slight tendency to extroversion. So people that were ready to open up, to be in connection with others, to be friendly, right? So somebody that you would want to hang out with, something like that. What was also interesting is that they were, in many situations, the parents were not good role models. So what they did was they were adopting, the kids were actually adopting role models from their extended family, from their neighborhood, from the sports club, from the church they were going to. So wherever, but typically it was same gender role models that they could kind of relate to, maybe look up to, and be in contact with. And that was very important for them. That was one crucial protective factors, as they say in resilience research. Another thing that they came up with was these youngsters and as later adults were able to talk about their emotions. So in other terms, they were able to open up. They could talk about what makes them happy. They could talk about what makes them sad, what they are concerned of, what they are afraid of, those kind of things. So anything else but the Chuck Norris approach of, oh, it's only a shot in the belly, I can just continue, no problem. I'm a strong man, nothing will hurt me. It's more this approach of making yourself open up, making yourself vulnerable, showing yourself to somebody that you trust. That actually was a point that was proven to be very critical in this. And another key was so-called access to resources. So resources in the world of psychology are things that you can do, or behaviors that you can do, that make you feel better. As an example, some of you wrote, I do physical exercise, I do sports in order to kind of clear my mind. That will be a resource, right? You do something, you do sport, you do meditate, you have your rituals, your structures, and as a result, you feel better. Or you write something and then you can say, yes, I did it, I tick it off. Those would be resources. And what you get then is you get a kind of circle that kind of strengthens itself, right? So by doing something, you feel better, you do other things, and you feel better as a result of that. Accurate self-image, that was a point that had to do to a degree with how am I as a person? What are my strengths? What are my possibilities? What is a realistic goal for myself? What can I achieve? Um, and having a good clarity around that, and also having a clarity around where do I need help? Can I ask for help? What is something that I'm sensitive towards? Everything around knowing yourself was part of that. And another element they found was something that's called realistic optimism. Now, what's the special thing about that? So if you think about optimism, that kind of makes sense, right? But think of the pandemic. Maybe an optimist would say, you know what? This is going to be over. It's just a flu. 3 months from now, we are all through this. Well, history has shown us that this was wrong. So what do you do after 3 months? You say, well, then next month. But eventually, that kind of optimism wears off. Realistic optimism, what's meant with that is, I don't know how long this will last. I know that I have everything that I need in order to go through this, but I have to pull myself together. I have to structure my day. I have to make sure that I monitor my energy. I have to do something for myself. I have to make an effort to connect to my friends. So all of that is much more work. I have to recharge my battery. So it's like I can do it, but I have to work hard in order to make it work. And I'm ready to do this. This is what's meant with realistic optimism. And then there's another final point, which is called self-efficacy, which is something that actually you already said as a finding, that this is that you believe that you are actually the master of your own destiny. The feeling that you have the conviction, I may not be able to control things. I may not be able to change a crisis or a pandemic, but I can control how I react to it. I can control how I shape the situation that I'm in, how I can influence the situation that I'm in. And those were the critical factors, the protective factors that Emmy Werner and her team identified. And they've been proven over and over again by numerous studies that to be effective and still effective. And some others have added over the years. But when we're talking about resilience, this still goes back to the fundamental work of Emmy Werner and her, record-breaking longitudinal study of about 700 youngsters over a period of 40 years, which is really a humongous project if you think about that. But there's one more aspect to resilience that I would like also to bring. And this has to do with you and your future. So some of you will become entrepreneurs. Some of you will become leaders, managers of other people. And so resilience is not only a capability to kind of go through a difficult time, it is also a capability that is needed in leadership. And why is this? So we live in a world where leading others doesn't work anymore with telling others what to do. We live in a time where people need to be won over to follow you. It needs to be attractive to work with you. It needs to be interesting. There needs to be a mission. The project needs to be interesting, but you as a leader, you also need to be interesting to attract people and, more importantly, to retain them over a longer period of time. Now, how do you do this? How do you make people follow you? One key aspect of that is trust. And one key aspect to gain or to develop trust, make others trust you, is that you are predictable under pressure. So that means if you have a good access to your emotions and you have a good way to kind of manage your inner world, influence yourself to get into a more positive state, into a more resourceful state, as a psychologist would say, that is key to being a leader that people look up to and say, this person has things under control. This person is strong in face of adversity. They radiate certainty, even if they are uncertain. I want to follow that person. I want to be working with that person. So there's a dimension of leadership that is connected to the ability of us to influence our inner world towards a more positive state. And this is precisely what is meant by resilience. Okay, so I would like to check in with you again. And to do this, what I would like you to think about, it's think about of some of the key aspects that are kind of linked to resilience. And in a minute, I will send you a survey. Actually, I will do this now so that you have plenty of time. And let's start this now. Okay, so this is a question with 4 sub-questions, and each of them has a scale from 1, not at all, to 10, totally. Your answers are anonymous. Nobody can see your name. And the idea is just to kind of come up from you, from the different students in this call today. So where do you stand with that? And then I will talk through what is so important about that. So let's see how we are doing here. Okay, we have only 1 answer so far. So you guys are thinking. That's good. Maybe whilst you're doing this, let me talk through the different points. Why are they there? So social connections. How satisfied are you with the quality and quantity of your social connections? Turns out that this is actually one of the key protective factors of resilience that we can actually engineer. Now, some people find it easier to reach out to others than other people. But again, I can make it my goal to be in touch with people that I like to hang out with, to talk about what I feel, what's in my world, what's meaningful for me, what's in my head, what I'm frustrated about. So we are talking about something that we can actually change tomorrow or even today. And so the question is, if you're honest with yourself, how happy are you with the topic social connections right now? Social engagement, why is that there? Turns out that social engagement, meaning I help others in an altruistic way, is actually great to improve your own level of well-being and resilience. Because when you help others, there's this feeling of contribution. There's this feeling of that means something. This is valuable. And also, if we are lucky, you get appreciation from the person that you've actually helped or worked for. And this appreciation is very positive for our inner world. And again, this is something that we can engineer. What is it that you decide where you want to help others? And that starts with holding a door open, or going grocery shopping for somebody, or sending somebody a compliment or a nice feedback via email or via chat. All of that is part of that, right? Another topic that is key for resilience is to which degree you have the feeling that you are growing right now, or that this crisis that you're going through will add to your growth. If you're kind of reflecting that and making sure that you also connect this to your past, what have you been going through? What were your experiences? How are you coping so far? How are you holding up? That is also a resource. That's a resource that we call biography. So how can we learn from our biography about the crisis and times of toughness in our lives that we have actually successfully mastered, and that inform us what we're actually capable of? But I mean, let's face it, situations like that, and you might have had situations in your life that were actually tougher than this one, but situations like that and other crises, they actually show us what we are really capable of. And if we have this in our mind, that's called self-actualization, we can actually say, I've mastered this one, so the next crisis, I'm sure I have a right recipe to address as well. And last one being meaning, and that is the point. So maybe it's tough right now, maybe this is a hard situation, but I know that what I do at the end has a lot of meaning to me, is meaningful to me. And that you always kind of pause and reflect, why is this meaningful to me? How is this meaningful to me? How can I amplify the meaning in my life? Because another piece of research, this goes back to Viktor Frankl, a famous Austrian psychoanalytic who survived the concentration camps of the Nazis. And he kind of went back to claiming that his feeling of sense of purpose in everything that he did was kind of the crucial glue in surviving the Holocaust. And that might be a drastic example, but there are numerous other examples that would support that thing and that theory. And the idea here is that these are protective factors, meaning if you have them, it's great. If you don't have them, it's not a big problem. It is not a risk factor per se. So I've been doing a lot of talking now. We got 51 replies. So let me show you the results. So let's go through this. Social connections. How satisfied are you with the quality and quantity of your social connections? So where do we stand? The majority being 7 on a scale from 1 to 10, 7. That's not too bad, right? So we get almost a normal distribution if you think of it. So the question is, how can you improve that? If you're not on the 7, how can you improve that? How can you be, applying self-efficacy, the master of your own destiny? How can you actually work on that? Moving on to social engagement. To which degree do you help others in an altruistic way? And again, 7 is the majority. 25% of you have said, yeah, 7, that's great. It's sizable. And so again, the question is, maybe that's something for the others to think about, how they can include that in their lives. Thank you for that. Personal growth. To which degree do you feel that you're developing in the past month with regards to your own life? And here, 2 are leading. This is 7 and 8. So this is great, meaning the majority of you feel that they are in the spot right now where they're actually growing. And I think that helps us to put things, hardships, in a different perspective, doesn't it? And so this is actually, I'm very happy about this score. And now last one, meaning. To which degree do you perceive your life as meaningful? And here, even more, this is the highest of all, 8 out of 10, 23% saying, I see my life as meaningful on a 10-point scale on 8. This is great. So there's a lot of protective factors. Now the thing though is, sometimes we do the right thing and it still hurts and it's still feeling painful. And that is the key thing with resilience. You can be resilient and things are still painful. And that's something that is kind of hard to stand, because actually we would like everything to be nice and easy. But why do we have to cope with all of that? And that has to do with our emotions. And we will come to that. What's the function of that? So thank you, first of all, for your feedback and hanging, being with us in this poll here. So let's talk about, how do we master crisis? How do we actually do this? So when I first got into resilience kind of research, or kind of studying what was out there, I came across, people who were using metaphors like, when you're resilient, you're like a bamboo, and when the wind comes, the bamboo goes with the wind, and when the storm comes, the bamboo lies down and waits till the storm is effectively over. And I was like, yeah, okay, get it. But what do you do when you lead a team? What do you do when you're responsible for your own company? What do you do when you have a family? You cannot just lay down and wait until the storm is over. So what's the alternative? And as I mentioned, I'm an engineer. So I looked for an alternative metaphor, and I came up with an engineering metaphor. And that is this building. And I'm sure we have some global travelers here in this class who know this building. It used to be the highest building in the world back until 2009. It's in Asia. And as you can see, it has a pretty elegant structure, kind of resembling maybe a palm tree a little bit. It's half a kilometer high, and it stands in Taiwan. The building is called Taipei 101. It has 101 floors. And now, if you're a professional skyscraper and you live in the island of Taiwan, you have a couple of challenges, wind being one of them. But the biggest challenge is earthquakes. There are 40 earthquakes, higher than 6 on the Richter scale. That would make it into the press every single time in Germany. And yet this half a kilometer high structure is still standing there since 2009. So the question is, how does it do it? And there's a particular trick that the engineers have developed here. And this structure has a pendulum mounted between the 86th and the 92nd floor. It's a 606-ton pendulum. And what it does is, when an earthquake hits, this pendulum gets set into motion by the earthquake. And then you can see the hydraulic cylinders. They are kind of dampening the movement of the steel pendulum. And as such, the shock waves of the earthquake get neutralized. Now, sounds very engineering, right? Like I know, but we can learn at least 3 things from this metaphor. Number 1, you can prepare for a crisis. You can read all the books. You can go to all the workshops. You can build a pendulum into a skyscraper. You will not prevent a crisis. And many people that we work with in coaching, many executives, they have the feeling, I wish there was no crisis. Of course, we can always wish there was no crisis. But, 2/3 of all managerial careers come across a crisis in their career. And this is research from the past. Now, looking forward, we can probably say that this number is likely to increase because the rate of change is increasing. So in other terms, whilst we wish there was no crisis, we can as well get ready for one, because there will be big crises in your career, be it professionally, be it in a private situation, be it health-wise. This is not to be negative. This is about being realistic. Second thing that we can learn from this, assuming all of us, all of the 57 of you and me, we were up there talking half a kilometer above the soil, and now an earthquake is hitting. There's half a kilometer skyscraper tilting back and forth. There's a 660-ton pendulum going back and forth, and we are in the middle. Is this the place to be? I would say I would be scared to death. Not sure about you. So in other terms, we can, when a crisis hits, even if we are resilient, which this structure is, it still feels awful. It still feels terrible for a short amount of time. And then it is really important for us to know, okay, this is this moment, this is this pendulum swinging, and I need some time. I need to meditate. I need to go run. I need to sleep. I need to talk to a friend. And this pendulum eventually will go to standstill. Sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes it goes shorter. But just that we know ourselves here, that this is called normalization, meaning that I know the facts here. I know how I can manage myself. This is me being, going crazy inside. This is nothing but the pendulum. And, with a little bit of time, adrenaline kind of moving my body, my system, that will go back into normal. And the third thing that we can actually learn from this metaphor is resilience has a lot to do with being active. So if there was just a pendulum, this building would have collapsed already. The fact is that the building itself has the intelligence to kind of actively work against the impact of the crisis by doing things that stabilizes it. And now the question is, how can we apply this to ourselves? How can we learn to stabilize ourselves? And this is what I would like to go through with you in the next second. So how do we actually go through crisis? But before we go there, I would like to check in with you again. And in your mind, I would like you to go through the most difficult time in your life. You don't have to share what it is. It's confidential. It sits with you. But I would like you to reflect. Go back there. Think about what you thought. Feel what you felt. How were your social interactions like? How was your energy level like? And just write into the chat. What did you feel? What did you think? What is your energy level? What were your social interactions? Just a couple of feedback from you guys. Maybe that toughest time is now, but maybe you also had tougher times or other tough times in your life. So, Maybe just one word to start us off. Isolation. Thank you. I felt insecure. Self-loathing. Thank you. What else? Feeling lonely. Wanting it to end. Yes, absolutely. Scared. Thank you. Thank you for being so open. Apathy. Yes. Feeling laser focused. This is interesting. Okay. Like in a circle, thinking ever the same. Mental rumination, we call this. Yes. Wanting the day to be over. Gosh, yeah, this day is so long, never ends. Thank you so much. We will integrate as more things come in. Paralyzed, not able to think clearly, social context reduced, and energy went up. So there seems to be laser focus, energy went up, and there's helpless. And how can this all be true in the same model? So I would like to use your input and build this into a model that was developed at Pennsylvania State University. This is where Martin Seligman taught. He's one of the people who, or the scholars who coined the term positive psychology, and a lot of the resilience research kind of goes back to him originally. And so this is the kind of framework that they came up with. So there's performance. So performance means to which degree we are awake, our level of intelligence, how well are we able to concentrate, our physical strength, all of that is meant with performance. And typically that kind of moves in a certain corridor. You know, Monday morning is not the same as Wednesday afternoon, right? So in that corridor, it kind of moves. And this is our normal kind of ability according to our biorhythm. And then a crisis hits. Now, a crisis can be obviously different things, can be of different intensity, it can be of different durations. Maybe it's not one crisis, maybe it's many crises hitting at the same time. So all of that makes a difference, of course. But typically what happens in a crisis is that there's some acute phase. This is what we call the compression phase. So in the compression phase, you become laser focused. Your energy goes up. You have to solve the crisis right now. You have to do something about it. And then eventually the acute phase is over. And so there's research, for example, around aircraft crews for international flights. Well, that was back in the days when you could still fly. But it's a surprising high amount of passengers who actually pass away on intercontinental flights. And obviously, if you are a crew member, you need to handle the situation. You need to make sure that there's first aid, that there is a doctor called, that the person is treated. And when the person has passed away, it needs to be put into a body bag. And then obviously you have to continue the flight because you can't turn around in the middle of the ocean. And then you have to escort all the passengers out. You have to smile at everyone, and then you kind of get rid of the body bag. And obviously, this is the acute phase of a crisis, and it can take hours, days, weeks, maybe even months, where you are in this compressed phase. But then, everything is kind of everybody's out the door, and then comes the decompression phase. And what typically happens in the decompression phase is a performance drop. And why is this? In this acute phase, our system emits adrenaline and noradrenaline, all the stuff that we need in order to fight, in order to flee, or in order to hide, or to freeze. And these kind of elements, they are great for activating muscle tone and heartbeat, and they are great for emitting or activating our emotional center, the limbic system and the amygdala. But they are also, as a side effect, shutting down the more modern part of our brain, which is the neocortex. And this part is partially also in charge for logical thinking and acting. So we're feeling a lot, we have a pounding heart, we are sweating, and we can't think a lot. And this is where we're kind of stuck with. And what we've done is, we have done some own research interviewing 218 international executives around how do you guys feel in such a situation? And this is what they came back with. So I'm feeling as a victim. I'm feeling a certain degree of fear. I'm feeling sleeplessness, depressive symptoms. I, focus on being busy. I'm, really excitable. I'm kind of paralyzed. I'm catastrophizing. There's social withdrawal. There's hopelessness, and there is even increased alcohol consumption and suicidal ideas, which, you kind of go, wow. I mean, that's tough. It's not a high degree, it's not a high number as such, but that it still exists. But people are passionate, right? And this is close to home. A crisis is kind of always close to home. Something that is very dear to you kind of gets affected. Now, again, I would like you to check in with you as we progress through this model. So if you go back to that situation that you were referring to earlier, and now you go a little step further in time when you kind of mastered this crisis, or when you were at the way out of that crisis. What I would like you to do is to reflect upon what is the one thing that helped me to feel better? What is the one thing that helped me to get back on my feet? And please write this one thing into the chat for me. Go for a walk, safe space, talking to people that understand you without judgment, talking with people, face the problem, getting into action, look forward to, getting some rest. Yeah, great points. Do we have some more? Cycle, yes, physical activity, acceptance of the emotions, doing reflection, doing something completely different and distracting. Very good. Friends, absolutely. Not generalizing it. This is one situation. This is not my entire life. Very good. Kind of structure and restructure your thinking, your day, your analysis. Good food is always a good thing. Yes, absolutely. Being able to share openly, yes, with others. Finding a new purpose. Very good. Yeah. So why do I do this? Answering that question. Great points that you have. And these, I would like to integrate them again into the model. So if we think about how performance works, there is 3 ways, in essence, after such a crisis. The worst of all possible ways is a permanent damage. That could be a depression, a burnout, an anxiety disorder, something of that kind of nature. Unfortunately, it happens, and then it takes a long time before people kind of recover, and some of them also never recover fully. There's the other opportunity to go back from there and recover, which is you do the coping, you do what is helpful for you, and over time, eventually, you get back on your feet and you feel better. And there is another phenomenon that is not so much known and is described in medicine as post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth, meaning you have gone through a crisis in a way that after the crisis, you feel that you are somehow have grown, that you are at a different level of performance, that you can kind of understand situations better, that you have a better judgment, you're calmer, you're more in charge of the situation. And that means nothing else than your threshold has moved from which point on you would recognize something as a crisis as opposed to a challenge. And this is not meaning semantics or changing the language or saying something is a challenge and not a problem. This is, that will be business lingo. I'm just talking from the inner perspective, that your inner kind of attitude has developed, has grown over that time. And what we do, the stuff that we do in order to get back up on our feet, this is what's called coping mechanisms in psychology. And what you just listed there were a ton of great coping mechanisms. And the only problem is people know about them, but they don't apply them. And that is and then we have less energy. And when we have less energy, we have less discipline. And as a result, we don't apply them and so forth. So we get into a vicious circle. And the question is, how can you spiral up and kind of increase your energy, get more self-discipline, do more of the same thing. And that, going back to Werner, that will be access to psychological resources, which is nothing but coping mechanisms. Now, we heard about the term self-efficacy in the beginning, which means I am the master of my own destiny. Assuming that was true, what can we learn? How can we actually choose the path in which we kind of develop? If we stay in damage, if we recover, or if we even go into post-traumatic growth? Well, maybe an instant reaction is you cannot influence that. It is just happening to you. Well, research shows us differently. And even in my time in the clinic, I was talking to people who had come through a severe depression. And there were a couple of things that I learned also from them, how they reflected the situation. And I think there are three things that we can safely say that kind of influence or have a potential to influence the path, how you're getting out of that valley of despair. One being to accepting the fact that you are down there, meaning that's the opposite of neglecting that there is a crisis. So acceptance. Number two, trying to learn from it, trying to, put yourself in a position where you really chew on what happened to you. Is that something that you have also a part in? How can you influence that? Sometimes that learning is painful and we want to kind of put it away. But people that have grown from people that have grown through such a situation have in common that they kind of chewed on and metabolized all the stuff that there was to learn from it. And the third point, and this might be surprising, or maybe you find this is positivistic in a sense, but it really starts with a decision. It really starts with a decision to say, I decide that I want to feel better. And that doesn't mean that you feel better, but it means that you start structuring your day. It means that you're looking for little successes, and maybe it's cleaning the dishes. Maybe it's, going for the dustbin or something like that. Could be tiny little things where you win back control over your life, kind of going back. And that is equally true for people that go through cancer. That is equally true for people who go through severe depressions or to, having lost somebody, loved ones, or a relationship situation. It is a universal kind of thing. And again, what we have done is we continued the research trying to identify coping mechanisms of managers. And obviously you will get those slides for your reference, and yet there's also a white paper with more details. And this is what they came back with. So many of them, pragmatic as business people are, claim that they would be focusing on aspects of their life which is positive, which means you need to look out for stuff that is positive. That's a different kind of a filter or focus point. There's this processing, what can I learn from the situation? And a lot of the things that you mentioned in the chat earlier on is in there as well. I would like to point your attention to the second row from below, and that says conscious practicing of gratefulness is one level up from using antidepressants. And the message from that chart is everybody has a lot of coping mechanisms that they know about, but not always they are using the right ones that are proven to be effective, and not always are they applying them enough. And that is then another challenge, right? So that will be the model around how resilience actually works. And this is the model in totality. And I would like to pause here and open it up for questions, remarks from the group. If you want to raise your hand, I'll write in the chat. And
here we go.
Okay, now there is one thing that is very serious that I would like to talk about. So the next chapter is not fun, but I promise we have a light note if time permits, and I'll make sure that this is happening. So assuming you go through a crisis and assuming it is just too much, or it's too long, or it's more than one crisis. So how do you know that you're actually in an unhealthy place? And what I would like to do with you is I would like to go through the symptoms of a arising fatigue depression. That is the clinical term for something that in vulgar language we call a job burnout. Job burnout is not a very precise diagnosis. It's actually not precise at all. It's not even an official disease, because if you look at 10 different cases, they all look different. But if you take 10,000 of them and put them on top of each other, you kind of get a shape and a pattern of the symptoms that arise. And what I would like to do with you is to run you through this model. And you can think, or you can look at the following through three lenses. One being, oh, interesting, good to know, because it is actually interesting. Second, which step do I know from own experience? And third, since you're also studying with peers, when is actually the first time that I would notice that something is, changing with my colleague, with my peer student, fellow student, right? So those would be the three lenses. And it starts with feeling overwhelmed. And I mean, if you study at HPI, or if you're, in an entrepreneurial world or in a leader world, everybody feels overwhelmed every now and then. It just so happens. You are performance oriented, you want to make a difference, you want to achieve something, and eventually you're trying to bite off stuff that is more than you can chew, and as a result, you feel overwhelmed. Totally natural, not unhealthy at all. But if it continues over a prolonged period of time, and I talk about weeks and months, eventually what happens is that this feeling overwhelmed turns into a kind of swing wheel inside your head or inside your body that starts to kind of run faster and faster and faster. And as a result, you feel some sort of vibration in your body, and you feel you have to do something, do something in order to get this energy kind of out. It's harder to sleep. You feel a lot of energy, actually, which is also a positive thing. But as it continues, eventually you feel more tired, and you feel that, oh, I can write this exam, I can write this paper, but it just takes much longer than expected. I've less energy at hand. It's much more difficult to kind of do. So as a result, you work more, you work longer hours, you put in more energy, which kind of propels the process that you go down kind of the stairs. And then the next step along the way at one point is called somatic symptoms. Somatic meaning body, physical symptoms. So it can be the skin, it can be losing hair, it can be back pain, it can be a heartbeat, blood pressure, digestive problems, all kinds of weak spots that each of us has. They kind of come up. And if you go to a doctor's at that point in time, they give you some sort of medication to treat the symptoms, but obviously that doesn't go to the core. Sleeping problems kick in. And then obviously everything goes a little faster because your energy kind of goes away. Then there's a feeling of hopelessness, meaning I'm not sure how this is going to end here. I'm sorry. And then eventually we come to a situation where there's increased excitability, meaning that you have, maybe somebody talks to you, and normally you would be nice and reply, in a nice way or in a neutral way. And here you're kind of losing it, and you're grumpy, and you're, letting the other person feel. You cannot contain your emotions so well anymore. And this continues. And why does it continue? Because we are self-disciplined. We want to achieve something. We are driven. We don't want to let our students, our fellow students down. Maybe we don't want to let our parents down, whatever. There's reasons to keep us going. And eventually we arrive at a point of reduced cognitive performance. So a story from my own history. When I was working at Bombardier, I was, in charge of global SAP projects. So as a result, I traveled from project to project to project, 2 flights, 4, 6, 8 flights a week. And one night I arrived in Frankfurt, and the immigration officer asked me, so Mr. Drath, where are you coming from? And I didn't have the slightest idea where I was coming from. And luckily I had the boarding pass that was back in the days of paper boarding passes in my shirt pocket, and I could answer the question. But I felt bad for not knowing it, and I knew something was wrong. Tendency for substance abuse. People are pragmatic. So if you feel you have less energy in hand and you still want to perform, you don't want to let anybody down, you think about what kind of substances can I use in order to get there. And then there is social withdrawals, trying to avoiding situations in which people would ask you, how are you? because you don't want to answer them. You feel less empathy for others. You're not interested in others anymore because all energy needs to be there kind of to help you through the day, and you know, and you're happy when the day is kind of over. Then emotional derailment, then you're already pretty far down. And that means, for example, that you get anxiety attacks, panic attacks. So all of a sudden you are shivering, your entire body is shivering and shaking. It's really exhausting, and it feels totally uncomfortable and frightening, merely frightening. And obviously afterwards you're totally exhausted. And as a result, if that happens over a prolonged period of time, your world gets darker and darker and darker. And eventually there are suicidal thoughts, which is not as uncommon as one thinks. And then there is the fully fledged depression, which is characterized through three cardinal symptoms, one being lack of energy, low level of emotions, so in other terms, negative emotions, and the third being severe sleeping problems. And this is kind of the fully fledged picture. At that point, you definitely need help, and you need to change. I mean, obviously, yeah, you can change anyway along the line, along the staircase, because a staircase works actually in two directions. But what we have to do is we have to change and turn around. And so this is kind of the critical situation here. And maybe to make it a bit more simple, I'm introducing 3 horizons that makes it easier for us in the chat. And I have a very simple question for you. Let's start with that question first. So assuming you would be working with fellow students in a learning group, with people in your friend, you know, in your circle of friends, at which horizon, if you're very honest to yourself, at which horizon would you, as a future leader, as a future entrepreneur, identify that something is changing with that person and that somebody might be sliding down this downward spiral? Just give me a 1, a 2, or a 3 in the chat. 2, okay. Most people say 2, yeah. Okay. So 2, that would be, for example, increased excitability. That's something that is noticeable, right? That's something that is kind of observable even in the virtual world. And then we are already halfway through. And this could mean that there is maybe some weeks or months of progress on this ladder. But 2 is actually a good thing. Once, you know, when I'm doing workshops in the business world, many people would actually argue that it's lower than 2. It's more towards 3, where people would actually feel that. But what is the thing here? What we need is we need to create situations where people are ready to talk about how they feel, even if they don't feel great. What we need is people in powerful positions to talk about their own level of vulnerability, and that they have resources that are, you know, not eternal, not infinite, so that we create a situation where it's okay to talk about that, so that people can actually help and do something about it. Because obviously, the further down you are on the staircase, the harder is it to get back out from your own experience or from your own means that you have access to. Okay, and I would also like to know another question from you. And again, this goes back to your own experience. And I'm not sure about if you have experienced this downward spiral from yourself. I know that typical, you know, leaders in our workshops, they are a little older than you. Maybe they're in their 40s, maybe they're in their 50s. They typically have some experience around that. But I'm not interested on which staircase you have been, but I would be interested in, again, if there was one thing that kind of you decided in order to be able to climb back up, what was that? Maybe you can write this into the chat. Going on holiday, that's a good thing. Go outside for a walk and talk with friends. Yeah. Letting go of unhealthy friendships that triggered unhealthy, very good. That triggered unhealthy patterns. Yeah. Changing the whole work-life situation. So some sort of change. And that is actually a key point that very often it has to do with the situation that we need to change something in the outside world, boundaries, patterns, work situation, friendships, in order to kind of, have a situation where we can actually walk back up. But the good thing here is it is doable. Sometimes it's very painful. Sometimes we need to admit that we did a mistake, and we need to we are confronted with our ego, but that is actually the way to cope with this. But our tendency is to kind of maintain the posture and maintain the strength and kind of go do it. But the risk is that we will be hitting the wall with this in the long run. So thank you for that. And there's one more thing that I would like you to take away from this session. And this is something that resilience is confused with a lot. And again, I go back to the times when I kind of was new to the subject, and I came to a talk on resilience, and somebody said, if you're resilient, you're like a beacon in the sea. And this was the picture that they were showing. So this is a beacon, and you can see the watchman there, obviously waiting for something. And there's a bit of a heavy weather, as you can see. And I was, I like pictures, I like visuals. So I was like, okay, I want to know more about this picture. So I researched a little bit about it. And the picture continues, the series continues like that. So there's the mother of all waves approaching. In the last second, the person could jump back in and was safe, but the water buried all over the place where he was standing. And key point for me is, if your only strategy towards crisis in life is being tough, then it is a question of time until something is tougher than you. It needs something else than toughness. And this is why I would like to introduce this diagram as a way to structure our thinking. And I would like to have one axis that is self-management. This is self-discipline, impulse control, commitment, motivation, going the extra mile. And then there is self-awareness, which is listening to my inner voice, self-reflection, intuition, body feeling, all of that dimension there. And if you have that, this mental frame, it kind of is easy to separate hardness or toughness from resilience, because both have a high self-management in common. Why? Because you need, in order to be committed, you need high self-management. But a resilient person is committed also to her own well-being, whilst a tough person is committed to outcomes, results, KPIs, and doesn't care about her own well-being. This is what separates toughness from resilience. And obviously we have two more fields here. One being derailed. That's a strong word, but remember, we work with executives, and if you have with leaders, if you have a leader that has a low level of self-management and a low level of self-awareness, this is the risk for himself or herself, but it is certainly a risk for the people that he or she is leading. Because imagine you have a boss that can't control him or herself and doesn't feel anything. That's hard to stand, and is a severe resilience risk for the people underneath. And then there is ambivalence. Ambivalence meaning, I know I need to sleep. I know I need to work out. I know I shouldn't drink so much. I know I should call my friends, but I don't. I just don't bother to do so because I don't have the energy, whatever. So these are the 4 quadrants. And again, what I would like you to do is to apply this to yourself. And I'm sending you another survey. If I manage to do so, just a second. There you go. And again, it's anonymous. And I would like you to reflect, according to this matrix, where are you on this diagram? Is it more on the tough side? Is it more on the resilient side? Are you even derailed? Nobody so far actually said that they were derailed. Nobody wants to be. That's called social desirability. And then there is ambivalent, meaning I know I should be doing, but I don't, right? And so until I let you kind of answer the question. And but this diagram also shows that the way to more resilience can look differently for different people. So if you're on the tough segment, obviously your way to more resilience is to work on your self-awareness. And if you are on the ambivalent segment, your way to more resilience has to do with how can I get more commitment? How can I get more self-discipline? How can I hook up with others that kind of drag me along so that I do the things that I want to do for myself? Okay, we have 30 feedback so far. So let me pause here and yeah, and show the results to you. So this is the results that you came back with. So we have ambivalent as the highest value, totally common, not uncommon at all. So you're in good company. It has to do with not only knowing what you should do, but doing what you should do in order to feel better. And it has to do with actively prioritizing our own well-being as high as deliverables for HPI, for our peers, for our friends, just to make sure that we are on the same priority list. And consequently, you said what I need more of is self-management. Great realization as a group. Now the question is, how can you guys that are peers, how can you support each other with that? Because commitment you typically increase together with others. However, let me ask you the question, who of you brushes their teeth in the morning and in the evening? Are those tasks that are very fun? I would argue not so much, but we got told to do them early on when we were kids. So in other terms, we can do things that we have identified as relevant for ourselves, and we have proven it to ourselves. So why can't we do other things? Food for thought. I'm running late for time, but there's one thing that I would like to give to you. One is the white paper that will be sent out after this impulse so that you can have a bit of a reading. And because I was talking a lot and very fast, that you can go through this again. And number two, there's one particular exercise I would like you to do with me. And maybe we will run a little bit over time, but trust me, it's worth it. So this is an exercise, again, that was developed by Pennsylvania State University. And the research that was done was also done there. And it's also deployed in the US Army in a program that is called Comprehensive Soldier Fitness, rolled out to 30,000 master resilient trainers in the US Army. And this is why it has a very martial name, a very manly name called Hunting the Good Stuff. And what you need now is you need a pen and you need a piece of paper. And I would like you to do the following. I would like you to write down 3 things that you are thankful for today. And now I make it a little harder. These are 3 things that need to have happened today, meaning gravity, democracy, the fact that you were born once don't count. It has to be something that happened today. So 3 things that happened today that you are thankful for now. Please write them down on a piece of paper. And maybe you feel, hey, I'm on a roll. That's easy. I have 3 things. Let's continue with yesterday. What are 3 things that happened yesterday that you feel grateful for? Okay, the experiment continues. And what I will do with right now is I'll put you in breakout groups. So you need to accept that you'll be sent into a breakout group. We will spend 4 minutes in the breakout group, and your only task is to tell the other person in the room what you are grateful for. So allow yourself to be quick since we are running out of time, but I would like you to do this experiment with you, and you will see the results afterwards. So I'm starting the breakout sessions now, and we are back in 4 minutes. So please accept. So some people are off their computer, which is why I need to rearrange some. Next part of the exercise is to please complain about life now. And please observe how you feel inside whilst you're trying to complain about life. Typically, we are good at doing that, but I bet you that some of you are wondering or maybe even smiling now and saying, I can't really complain about life. Why is that? Because when we are grateful, we cannot be grateful and grumpy at the same point in time. It just doesn't work. Our brain can only do one thing at a time. And if we move ourselves into the state of gratefulness, it actually is a bit of a vaccination, funny word these days, a bit of a vaccination against going into this victim state. And this is not, me making a statement. This is actually research from Pennsylvania State University. What they've done is they've done this exercise with students and control groups who did other things over 9 weeks, 5 minutes of journaling every day, what people are grateful for. And they were able to prove increased values for emotional stability over a period of 24 months. So let me repeat, something that is free of charge, takes you 5 minutes, you can do on a daily basis, and makes you emotionally more stable over a period of 2 years. You are welcome. Now, you only have to try it and do it yourself. So please, if you want to commit to that, put it in your diary, anything that you would put in your diary, in your Outlook schedule or whatever, a Google Calendar, to make sure that you remind yourself of it and try it, and let me know how things are working after 9 weeks from now. So that's the tool that is proven to work, and it's working in good times and it is working in bad times. So I hope that some of you kind of take the initiative and actually try it. So closing words, I know I'm over time, or hardly over time, a little bit over time. So closing words. Remember, dealing with crisis has a lot to do with self-efficacy. So rather than thinking, who made me happy today, think about, who did you make happy today? Because if you have somebody else, if you help somebody else to become happier, give them a compliment, be altruistic to them, you are actually helping yourself, because it helps you feel meaningful and it helps you feel worthy and all of that. So maybe use that as a frame of reference when you feel blue or when you feel down. Who can I actually call up? Who can I send a message? Make him a compliment or her, or give a positive feedback, encouragement, something like that. Another thing I would like to give you as a tool, this is the Milky Way. And where we see the Google Maps symbol, this is the Oort's cloud, which is a collection of solar system. Within there, there's one solar system. From that solar system, the third planet from the inside, they're a continent and a couple of biological creatures looking into square boxes, thinking about resilience. So from this perspective, and let's recall, this perspective is equally true. What are we actually worrying about, right? So that means, how can I zoom out? How can I consciously put me into a different perspective that kind of help me to get more distance from the situation? And that's a bit of a mental experiment. And maybe, you find metaphors that work better for you than this one, but you use all of these are techniques that we can actually use to overcome our negativity bias. We have all a natural tendency to focus on the stuff that is broken rather than on the stuff that is actually working. And using different techniques like this perspective seeking, we can actually work on getting ourselves in a better state. And with that, a little bit over time, I would like to close this session. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for your interaction. I would love to be able to see you in person, but maybe we achieve this next time. Thank you.